Okay. Did we begin with the respiration, like the exchange of gases in plants?
No, ma'am.
All right. Okay, dear. Switch on your video. Let's start this topic now. So talking about the exchange of gases, now see in the previous class, we had discussed about respiration, which was the cellular release of energy, isn't it? It was the breakdown of biomolecules so as to release the energy. Now we're going to talk about the breathing and the exchange of gases. So breathing and the exchange of gases just means that taking in of oxygen, giving out of carbon dioxide. And this exchange of gases, it takes place in both plants as well as the animals. So for example, if we are talking about the exchange of gases in the case of plants. Now see, remember that plants utilize CO2 and they give out oxygen. Okay, so the gaseous exchange that takes place in the plants, it happens through the pore-like structure which is called as the stomata. So stomata, these are tiny holes or tiny pore-like structures that are present on the leaf. And remember that if you know that the leaf has an upper surface and a lower surface, so remember that the number of stomata on the lower surface of the leaf will be more. Why? Because this lower surface will be in less contact with the environment as compared to the upper surface. So there will be less loss of water from that stomata. This is the reason why the stomata, they are present underneath the surface of the leaf so as to avoid the transpiration. Clear? Now the stomata, it acts like the entry and exit point for the gases, meaning the gases that comes into the plant and that goes out of the plant, it happens through the stomata only. Okay, and you know that the plants, they take in the CO2 for their photosynthesis, and as a result of the photosynthesis, they also produce the byproduct, which is called as the oxygen, right? Now, the gases, they move through the stomata via diffusion process. Now, see, this is the enlarged version which shows the stomata. So, on the leaf, there will be this circular structure. Okay, so now stomata, it has the property of opening and closing. So, the stomata, it usually remains open during the daytime and then it closes at the night. So what can we conclude by this? We can conclude that the stomata is opening and closing. And how do they do that? So the opening and closing of the stomata, it is regulated by the guard cells. Okay. The guard cells, they regulate the opening and the closing of stomata. Now when the guard cells, when they absorb the water, they become swollen. Okay. See, what happens if this is the stomatal pore, surrounding the stomatal pore, there will be thick cells, which are called as the guard cells. Okay. So it's like this, like my two hands are the guard cells and in the middle, there is the stomata. So when the guard cells, they're going to absorb water, okay, and they will become swollen. So once they become swollen, they open the stomatal pore like this. And when they lose the water, they become shrunken and then they close back up like this. So that is how, like if anyone would ask you, which cell regulates the opening and closing of the stomatal pore? So it is the guard cell. Now remember that whenever the guard cell has absorbed the water, they are called as turgid. And whenever the guard cells lose the water, they become shrunken. So the shrunken guard cells would be called as flaccid. Clear? Now if you see this picture, see, this is the difference. This is the open stomatal pore. So this white area is the stomata and it is open. Why? Because the guard cells, they have absorbed water and they have become swollen. And what did I say? What will the swollen guard cell be called as?
Turgid.
Turgid. And when the guard cells, they lose the water, they'll be shrunken. And what will you call them?
Flaccid.
Flaccid. Very good. So remember, this is the stomatal aperture. Like this is the whole entire arrangement of the cell. Right in the middle is the stomatal pore. Surrounding the stomatal pore are the guard cells. And then surrounding the guard cells are the next type of cells called as the subsidiary cells. So these are outer cells. And outer to that, all the cells, they are called as the epidermal cells. So here mainly you have to study about the function of the stomatal pore and the guard cell. Okay, so but this is the whole entire structure of the stomata and how it opens and closes. Now, can you tell me why stomata is present abundantly underneath the surface of the leaf?
Because it helps them do the process of transpiration, and
Yes.
it will also help them, like it will also help the plant by not losing excess water, like not losing water.
See, if you say that it will help the plants to prevent transpiration, that itself means that it will not allow excessive loss of water. Okay, very good. Okay, what is the function of guard cells?
The function of God cell, the function of God cell is they they control the opening and the closing of this
Very good.
tomato
Exactly.
pore.
Huh.
When the guard cell becomes swollen, it opens, and when it's drained, it closes.
And can you explain the difference between flaccid and turgid guard cells?
When flaccid, they become shrunken, and when turgid, they are swollen.
Very good. So any doubts up until now? Okay. So this was how the exchange of gases would take place in the case of plants. Now let us see the exchange of gases in the case of animals. Now you know that animals, they are of so many different types. There are some animals that live on the land, some animals live in the water, right? So they have different habitats. So depending upon the habitats, they have different respiratory or breathing organs. So different animals, they have different kinds of organs for breathing, and that depends upon the habitat as well as their body organization, meaning whether they are lower organisms, higher organisms. Now see, the organisms that live on the land, okay, we call them as the terrestrial animals, and they breathe in to the atmosphere, right? The oxygen, the air that's present in the atmosphere, and that is what they breathe in. But if you think about the animals that live in the water, you call them as the aquatic animals. So they will take the amount of oxygen from the water, isn't it? The water that has the dissolved oxygen in it, the oxygen that is mixed in the water. So the aquatic animals, they are going to take up the oxygen from the water itself. Is it clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Now see, if I tell you that if you compare the amount of oxygen in the water and the amount of oxygen on the land, which one do you think is more and which one is less?
In water, it is less, and in the atmosphere, it is
Yes,
more.
very good. So the amount of oxygen that is present in the water, it is going to be much less as compared to the land. And this is the very reason why you would see that the fishes, they are constantly breathing in the water, isn't it? They're constantly opening their mouth, closing their mouth. Why? Because the amount of oxygen is very less in the water. And you might have seen there are some other mammal, like aquatic mammals, such as the whales and stuff. They come out of the level of water, they take in the oxygen, and then they go back in, isn't it? Why? Because they are bigger size animals and they need more oxygen. So that is why they come out of the level, go inside. Same goes for dolphins. Now let us see the examples of the respiratory organs. So there is gills, lungs, book lungs, and trachea. Okay, gills are mostly found in the fishes. Okay, lungs are mostly found in the terrestrial animals. Okay, book lungs are mostly found in animals such as the scorpions and stuff. Okay, so scorpions, they have book lungs, and then the trachea, mostly they are found in the insects. So different animals, they have different breathing organs. But the one that we are concerned with is the human respiratory system or the human breathing system. So the human breathing system consists of all of these parts that you see right on your screen. You do not need to practice to draw this, but you should remember all the labels. Okay, all the labels that are there are very, very, very important. They can ask you, like they will give you the diagram and they will ask you to label the diagram. So never forget to read all of the different labelings that are there. You should know which is what. Now see, our respiratory system and its parts. First, there is the nose, right? Now the nose is there, which opens through the external nostrils, and the air is breathed in or taken in through the nose, right? Now inside the nose, the nasal cavity is there, which is lined with the hair. Tiny hair is there, mucus is there. Why? So that the air that we breathe in, if there is any dust particle, all of that, so that will be caught up in the hair, so that we get clean air. After that, there comes the larynx, which is the voice box, right? It is responsible for the production of sound. You can also call it as the sound box. Then the pharynx, which is like the common passage for the food also and the air also. Okay, so the pharynx, it is like protecting, or you can say it's like one common passage. So through this only further the air will go into the trachea, and the trachea is called as the windpipe. Okay, it is the main windpipe that will be leading towards the lungs in our body. Okay, so the trachea or the windpipe, it rises below, like the first part is the nose, the second part is the pharynx, the third part is the larynx, and then the fourth part is the trachea. So now through the trachea, the also remember the trachea. For example, if this is the trachea, so it has incomplete cartilage surrounding it. Why is it present? It's present so that the trachea does not collapse. Okay, that is why these incomplete rings of cartilage are present. T-shaped cartilage rings are present so that it doesn't collapse. Okay, now the trachea goes and gets divided into primary bronchi, and then it ends at the lungs. And these lungs, they have, like, these are the organ of respiration for humans, and inside the lungs there are balloon like structures present, which we call as alveoli. This is where the oxygen is given in and the carbon dioxide is given up. Okay, so this is the exchange part of our respiratory system. Now remember, our heart and our lungs, they are protected by our ribs. The whole entire set of ribs that we have, we call it as the rib cage. So our rib cage is there in our body so as to protect our heart and our lungs. So now see, the external nostrils are there. They are responsible for the intake of air. Okay, so through the nostrils, the air comes in. Now, from the nostrils, the air would move into the nasal chamber, okay, which is this particular part. Then, after that, it will go into the pharynx. Pharynx is that one common portion which will be having, like it is the common portion wherein the food will be passing as well as the air will be passing. Clear? After that, it moves into the larynx. Now, larynx is called as the sound box, and the way like you can hear my voice and I'm speaking, it's because of the larynx. Okay, the larynx produces the sound. Now, remember that the windpipe cannot get food into it, or else we'll choke and we'll die. So that is why our windpipe, our trachea, is protected with a flap-like structure called as epiglottis. Okay, the upper part of the trachea is called as the glottis, and the flap that will cover the glottis is called as epiglottis. So when we are swallowing the food, we do not want our food to go into the windpipe. That is why epiglottis covers the opening of the trachea so that the food will directly go into the esophagus, which is the food pipe. Then the air would come into the trachea, So it is a long tube that is present in the mid chest. Right in the middle of our chest, our trachea is present, and it is surrounded by rings of cartilage to protect it from collapsing. Then the trachea divides into left and the right bronchi, and then further divisions happens. For example, if this is the trachea, and then once it divides, it has to go into the two lungs. So this and this division, this is called as the left and the right bronchi. Okay. Then further it is going to divide more like that. Okay. And then ultimately it will be ending with the alveoli like that. And this all will be present in the lungs. Clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, the alveoli is the exact, like you can say, the location where the actual exchange of gases takes place, and they are present in the lungs. Always remember that one thing, that the lungs or the alveoli, they are very, very richly supplied with blood vessels. Okay, a lot of blood vessels are present so that easy diffusion can take place. And remember that the lungs, we have one pair of lungs in our body, which are sac-like structures, and they are covered by double-layered membrane called as the pleura. Okay, or you can call it as the pleural membrane. So remember that our lungs is protected by a layer, and that layer is called as a pleural membrane. Is it clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Any doubts up until now?
No, ma'am.
Okay, very good. Now let us see the mechanism of breathing. Now see, as far as the breathing is concerned, do you know what is the meaning of direct proportional, inversely proportional?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. See, the whole entire mechanism of our breathing is dependent upon the inverse proportionality between pressure and volume. If I say that the pressure and volume are inversely proportional, then what would it mean? Tell me.
Pressure and volume.
Hmm.
If pressure is more inversely proportional, right?
Yes, yes, that your answer is correct. Continue.
If proportional, pressure is more,
Ah,
volume is less. If volume is more, pressure is less.
very good. Exactly. So, inverse proportionality tells us that if the pressure is going to increase, the volume will decrease. And if the volume is going to increase, the pressure is going to decrease. Very good that you know this. Now see, for our breathing, we require special sets of muscles that are called as external and internal intercostal muscles. And then we also require a dome-shaped diaphragm. See, this is the structure of the lungs, and below that is the dome shaped diaphragm present. Okay, normally its shape is like this. Okay, it's dome shaped. Okay, now see what happens is that our whole entire breathing, it is based on the pressure volume relationship and the diffusion of gas. So now what happens is that when we breathe in, okay, the diaphragm which was like this, the diaphragm will become flat. Okay, and when you breathe in, like you breathe in, put your hand on your chest and you breathe in. What do you feel? When we breathe in, our chest rises up, isn't it? So the cavity of the chest, it increases, and the cavity of the lungs increases. So you can say that if the chest is rising up, the volume is increasing. So what will happen to the pressure of the lungs?
Decreases.
It will be decreased. Yes, very good. So now in the outer atmosphere, there is a higher pressure of gas, and in our body, there is a lower pressure. So now the gases, they move from high pressure to low pressure. So now the air would come into our body, and that is how we breathe in. But when we are breathing out, our like the flattened diaphragm, it goes back to the normal state. Our ribs that were lifted up, they will go back. So the volume is decreasing, but the pressure will increase. Now, comparatively, the pressure outside will be less, so the gases will move out. Got it? This is
Yes.
the whole entire mechanism of breathing. So when we breathe in, the diaphragm flattens, our ribs, they lift up, and the volume of the chest cavity increases. So the pressure decreases. Now in the atmosphere, the pressure is high, right? So the gases, we know they move from a region of high concentration to the region of low concentration. So this process of breathing in is called as inspiration, another name for it. And the process of breathing out is called as expiration. Now, during the expiration process, everything opposite will happen. The diaphragm is going to go back to its normal state. The ribs, they would come down. The volume is going to decrease, but the pressure will be increasing, and the CO2 gas is released out. Clear?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, when we go up in altitude, right? So
Hmm.
the air pressure becomes no, not the air pressure outside becomes less and less. So our lungs become more pressurized. That's why our
See, when we are moving on towards higher altitudes, there is less amount of oxygen in the atmosphere. Okay, because as you go high up, the amount of oxygen that is in the air, it will decrease. So that is why we have such a difficulty in breathing in, because the amount of oxygen that we need in from the outside is itself low. But after a little while, we start feeling fine. It's because in our body, more and more RBCs are synthesized, and then we feel better because they carry more and more oxygen. Clear?
Yes, ma'am.
That is why when we are going towards the higher altitude, for that period of time, you'll feel sick. You'll feel like you're about to throw up or you'll feel out of breath. But after a while, you'll feel that, okay, perfectly fine because our body gets adapted to that situation. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So during the breathing cycle, meaning during the intaking in of air and giving out of air, the like even if we say that while we are breathing out, the gas like we are breathing the air out also, right? But that doesn't mean that the lungs will be empty. There will be no point of time where our lungs will remain empty. Okay. Why? Because in our lungs, they always contain a residual volume, meaning that amount of air is always going to stay in the lungs. Because imagine if the lungs is like taking out the air, it will become flat like this. We can't afford that or else we'll die. So that is why a minimum amount of air is always present in our lungs, and that is what we call as residual volume. Clear?
Ma'am.
Hmm. Now, when the body size of the animal is large, the diffusion, it is not enough to take care the needs, right? It's not enough to exchange the gases. So that is why in us like humans, we have a respiratory pigment, which is called as hemoglobin, right? Where is the hemoglobin present?
In RBC.
Yes, in the RBCs of our blood, that is the red blood cells. The reason why they are red, it's because they have the red colored pigment hemoglobin. Now this hemoglobin, it can carry oxygen and it can carry carbon dioxide. So once in our lungs, the oxygen would come, it will diffuse into our blood. And then the hemoglobin is going to take that oxygen and transport it to all the organs of our body. So that is the function of hemoglobin, which is the respiratory pigment. And it also takes the CO2 from our body and gives out to the lungs. Clear? Any doubts, Ina?
No, ma'am.
All right, now let us see some questions. Can you tell me what is the role of alveoli?
To take in oxygen and give out carbon dioxide.
Yes, so the alveoli is the site of exchange of gases, isn't it? This is where the exchange of gases takes place. Clear? What is hemoglobin?
Hemoglobin is a respiratory pigment present in our blood.
Hmm.
It has more affinity to oxygen
Hmm.
so that it carries oxygen to every cell.
Very good. And see, it has more affinity for oxygen. That means that if even if the carbon dioxide will be present in more number, it will first combine with the oxygen, right? And you already, do you know this? That hemoglobin plus oxygen, what do you call this complex as?
Um, I
You call it as
I have
oxyhemoglobin. Okay, so whenever the hemoglobin combines with the oxygen, it makes oxyhemoglobin. Okay, what if the carbon dioxide is combining with the hemoglobin? What will it make? It will make, do you know the name? It will be called as, say,
I forgot.
it will be called as carb amino hemoglobin. Okay, this HB is the symbol of hemoglobin. Now, same thing if, let's just say, instead of carbon dioxide, we have a very poisonous gas, which is called as carbon monoxide. So when the hemoglobin combines with carbon monoxide, it forms carboxyhemoglobin. This is very, very harmful for us. Carboxyhemoglobin. Any doubts?
So
Hmm.
if we inhale this, HPCO will die instantly.
We are not inhaling HbCO, we are inhaling CO, that is carbon monoxide. And then when the carbon monoxide combines with our hemoglobin, that makes this compound called as HbCO, that is hemoglobin with carbon monoxide. And this is a very poisonous gas because it will decrease how much of oxygen is reaching our organs, and it will increase the amount of carbon monoxide in our body, and yes, then we'll die because our organs will not receive enough oxygen. You know, for people that are like somehow got trapped in a burning building, or there is a lot of fire around them, so in them, because of the fire, they get carbon monoxide poisoning because they inhale a lot of carbon monoxide due to the fire, due to the ashes and stuff. Clear?
Clear, ma'am.
Any doubts?
No.
All right. Okay, now you note down, then we'll move forward.
Ma'am, last class, right? I have wrote till glucose, that breakdown of glucose. That's it. That's enough. Till only
No,
till
no, no.
that.
I will be sending you that notes, okay? So that you can complete your notes. I will send you the notes, okay? It's not enough.
So,
Huh.
ma'am, we fully covered that topic.
Yeah, we too completed that topic in the previous class.
We fully completed respiration.
Yes, we did. See this? Remember, I asked you about the different types of breakdowns. You only told me how the lactic acid was being formed in the lack of oxygen and not in the absence. Remember?
Yes, ma'am.
We did this. This topic was completed, yeah, but your notes were not completed. So for that, I will send this whole entire PDF over. Okay.
Okay, ma'am.
So once you receive the PDF, you can note it down. Right now, you note down this part, and however much you will be able to write in today's class, that's okay. I will send these notes also. Okay.
Okay. Ma'am, can you scroll down? Ma'am, no need to draw the diagram.
Yeah, you could draw this diagram, this one. Okay, not that. That is not necessary.
Ma'am, can you scroll down?